Do you sometimes feel like your hands have a mind of their own when you're riding? That you want them to do and be a certain way, but they just, I don't know, they just go off script and they're doing their own thing. Well, today is the day that we're going to talk about steadying up those hands a little bit so that you can be a little bit more consistent in your communication with your horse. Okay, let's dive in. Hey there, and welcome to the Daily Strides podcast. My name is Lorna Leeson. I'm an equestrian trainer and coach, and I work with riders from all over the world, helping them to understand how to communicate better with their horse through their aids, especially if they don't have the help of a regular instructor or trainer. Okay, so your hands. Last week we spoke about the swinging lower leg, hey? The leg that was just doing the hokey pokey. But today I want to talk about your hands and how a lot of riders, this can be the big sticking point. They want to have steady hands. They know they need steady hands. But you know what the funny thing is about your hands? The more you actively try to steady them, usually the more animated they become. They go from being maybe a little bit kind of, animated and moving about to conducting orchestras. You are directing air traffic. You are doing all of the things. And it can be so frustrating because, as I said, you know that in order to really complete the cycle with your horse when it comes to energy and when it comes to the two of you working together, we need to get the contact and the connection right. And we can only do that if we're lovely and consistent and soft with our hands. So let's dive in. Now, very often, many riders don't even realize that their hands are doing a little bit too much until they either see a video of themselves or it's pointed out to them. And then it quickly turns into one of those things that when you become aware of it, you can't unsee it, because literally you can see your hands the whole time, and it's so frustrating, especially when you're looking at your hands and you're like, stay still, will you? And they just don't want to. Now, I do think that very often there are kind of two ways we can look at this. The first one is you are actually intentionally, whether you want to or not, you are moving your hands about. And very often this is due to incorrect holding of the reins, and the reins are literally slipping through your hands and you're constantly having to shorten the reins. Okay, so you're lengthening, maybe not intentionally, but you're lengthening the reins, now you're shortening the reins intentionally. And then you're lengthening them and then you're shortening them. You're slipping and you're shortening, you're slipping and you're shortening. This drives me bananas when I see riders doing it, okay? And that's a very, very simple thing to work on. It just comes down to learning how to hold the reins correctly. Now, the other way is when you're unintentionally moving your hands about. And very often I find this comes down to using your hands a little bit too much for balance and support, okay? Now, what I would suggest doing is before you get started, really figure out where you are on the spectrum, okay? What are you doing? What are your hands doing? So what I would suggest doing is getting a whip or a stick. It doesn't have to be a whip, okay? But a shortish stick or a whip, a crop, okay? And you're going to hold your reins normally, so thumbs on top, yeah, like you're carrying cups of tea, yeah? And you're going to just lift your thumbs up like you're giving somebody in front of you the thumbs up sign. And you're going to put your whip or the stick down over your fingers and then clip your thumbs into position, okay? So you're going to clip your thumbs in so that your thumbs are now holding the stick or the whip or whatever it is that you've put across, okay? Very lightly. We're not grabbing on for dear life, okay? Just very lightly. And then what you're going to do is as you're riding, you're going to begin to have a look at what exactly is going on here. Now, for many riders, you know what they actually figure out here? Not so much their hands are moving, it's that one hand is always lower than the other. And you can see it, especially if you've got like a riding whip or a crop, because it's long enough that you'll see one end is sticking up in the air and the other end is pointing down to the ground. eye-opening stuff, hey? So have a look at it. Have a look at what's going on with you. And what I would suggest you doing is videoing yourself and really, really like focusing. If you don't have somebody to help you, and you know what? I even think sometimes having somebody to help you, having somebody there who's going to tell you, oh no, look, you're doing this or you're doing that, or you're not doing this or you're doing that. Yeah, I sometimes think that we are actually better off seeing it for ourselves. I really do strongly believe that for so many riders, because we think and we feel like we are doing things a certain way. And it's only when we see it in front of us, I was going to say in black and white, but I'm going to assume you're going to video in colour, hey? So when you see it in front of you in colour, then you can be like, oh, goodness gracious me. That was not what I thought I was doing at all. And you can then begin to make the changes, okay? So video yourself with a stick. The other thing I would suggest doing, if you can, is to get yourself a pair of white gloves and video yourself with a pair of white gloves on, because it becomes really, really obvious. They stand out in the video. The whiter, the better, hey? And if you can kind of see then what your hands are doing, that is going to help you to begin assessing where you are right now. Now, I also think that it's important then to begin to evaluate kind of if this is just a habit or if there's something deeper going on, okay? If there's a bigger kind of a challenge going on. Now, very often, as I said, it's a balance or an instability problem. So you'll see riders and they'll move their hands to actually just balance. And it's really just because your hands are at the end of your arms and your body's kind of moving everything to try and balance. It's like walking across a plank. You'll put your arms out to try and balance yourself. It's a little bit like that, okay? But the other thing that very often happens is that, and I mentioned this last week about the swinging lower leg, is that we actually are not doing basic things correctly, such as posting to the trot, hey? And what many riders do is they're actually pulling themselves up using their hands or their shoulders instead of really using their core and their body and even their legs to a little bit to actually do this more forward movement, forward and back and forward and back and forward and back versus the up down, okay? So that can also be an issue. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to first of all make sure that if I was with you in the arena and your hands were moving all about the place, hey, giving all the air traffic signals, okay, then the first thing we would do is just make sure that your elbows are good. And if you're thinking my elbows, oh yes, your elbows, hey. So often riders, their elbows are like just so straight. And this causes very kind of shaky, wobbly hands, okay? Bend your elbows. Let your elbow drape down from your shoulder. Let it just fall down your side and just be there right beside your sides of your body and bending to the bit, okay? So you have this lovely straight line, we've mentioned it before, from the elbow down through the hand, through the rein to the bit, okay? So your elbows would be my first thing that I would look at. And then once I've made sure that you are in the correct position and all the lines are sorted out, okay, we've got everything straightened out, I would then start thinking about the core strength and your core strength and potentially lack of core strength, okay? I do think that there is a lot you can do off of the horse that's going to really help you to actually remedy this challenge when you're on the horse. Very often this is something that, yes, you can work on it in the saddle, but you can also really, really work on this out of the saddle as well, okay? And I also then want you to think about the connection between your seat and your hands. Now, your seat and your hands are very, very much connected. In fact, your hands really just follow whatever it is the seat is doing. But for many riders, we get that connection the opposite way around. We lead with our hands instead of leading through the seat. And that's something that you have to just going to work on and to try and rewire with yourself. And what I would suggest here, if you could, and I do understand that this could be a little bit challenging, but if you could, a couple of lunging lessons. Now, not with you lunging your horse, No. Although that is always amazing. No, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about you actually riding your horse and you and your horse being lunged by somebody else. So you've almost got this dual control, the other person, and even to the point where they are doing the controlling, they are speaking to your horse. You're just able to focus on you. I find that can really, really be helpful in these sorts of situations. Now, if you can't do that, if it's not possible, and I get it, so many of the riders who listen to the Daily Strides podcast, they're out in the sticks, okay? If you're in the sticks, don't panic. What I would suggest doing is maybe fencing off a small area, like a lunging arena. So something about 20 by 20 meters. I think that's 65 by 65 feet, okay? So it's nice and small, flattish ground. And then you can practice alone. So if it's safe to do so, you could practice walking without your reins. You could practice trotting without your reins. You could practice posting without your reins, all the things, okay? And really, the more you can do this and the more you could actually video yourself doing it so as you can give yourself some feedback, that would be really, really helpful as well. Now, what I do want to warn you about here is that very often when we begin to focus on this particular challenge, it can get worse before it gets better, hey? And don't be disheartened by that. I think it's like the concentration that we put into it kind of creates a bit too much tension. And that tension just blocks the suppleness. It blocks the softness, okay? So you may see things kind of go a step back before you'll go forward. Stick with it. What I would also suggest you could do would be get yourself a nice big exercise ball or Pilates ball, whatever you want to call it, one, but a big one, not a small one, okay? A nice big one. And you're going to sit on it. You could do this in the evenings. You can just practice a little bit. I don't know if you watch TV or something like that, or if you sit down, you chat with the family, but sit on the ball and then make yourself a pair of reins. And I know this sounds really strange. You could just use your own reins, hey? But fix them to something like they would be, like how they would then come to you if you were riding. And you could practice then posting and that with the ball, and you can even practice sitting trot, you can practice canter, you can practice all those motions, all those feelings of how your body will move, and then you can really get into practicing that connection between the seat and your hands as you're doing it with your horse. And that can also be very helpful. And again, you're not in the saddle, you're not annoying your horse, but you're actually really working towards working on this problem and kind of, I suppose, steadying up the hands. But we'll go back to that steadying up. I like that kind of a phrase because, you know, your hands, we don't actually want very still hands when we ride. Your hands, as I said, they're a real extension of your seat and they do move. The problem becomes when they move either the wrong way or they are just like moving all over the show, hey? We don't want that. We want this to be steady. Steady is a good word. We'll go with steady. Okay, this is going to take time. It's not something you're going to fix overnight. But I think by being aware of it, using the video initially, and whether you use the stick across your fingers, your hands, or whether you use the white gloves, and then by regularly videoing yourself and trying to update, you will begin to figure out what is working and what's not. And again, I do really strongly suggest working on yourself out of the saddle, whether it be to develop your strength and your fitness, especially through your core, or whether it be to do more practical things such as the exercise ball, okay? Working on yourself out of the saddle and then consistently also being diligent in the saddle, you're going to begin to improve the issue. Now, what I'm going to do is I am going to, for Thursday's Strides Revisited episode, I'm going to actually put in an episode from a couple of years ago about 4 things that you can specifically look for when you're doing your review of your own riding, that you can really begin to tweak and change to identify what exactly is going on. So make sure you get that as well. And of course, if you would like more help getting the basics on the correct basics onto autopilot, make sure you pop over to returningtoriding.com, get on the wait list, and we will have something coming for you very soon. Okay, I'm going to leave it there. Have an absolutely fantastic week. Keep well, and I'll chat to you soon. Be good. Bye.